When something hurts, we just call a doctor, so why not do the same when it comes to your mental health? Here to talk to us about it, please welcome Justyna Bąba. Hello, Justyna.
Hello everyone. Hello from Warsaw. Thank you for having me here.
Hi, Justyna, did you have a chance to watch the previous session when we talked about the Imposter Syndrome?
Yes, I have.
Well, I was thinking about this last quote that Ekaterina left us with. Well, obviously, some people believe in such statements a little more than others, and one almost wishes they didn't, on the other hand, because especially, again, in politics, when you think about it, sometimes we get the impression that if some of our leaders in politics decided to follow a career in becoming a self-love coach instead of political leaders, I think the whole world would benefit much more than in their political roles, I suppose. You represent MH Helpline, which works in partnership with Diversity Hub. Can you tell us a little bit, as a starter, establish a little background? What is MH Helpline?
Yes, that's a new project, let's say. I think Tadeusz, who is the CEO of this project, will tell you more details at 1 p.m. or so. But for the start, this is a kind of new version of help that is very demanded, especially in this pandemic time. It's an video online help. You can meet their psychologist or psychotherapists or coaches or mentors, and you can ask them for help during some mental crisis, especially mental crisis. But also, if you like, you can continue those meetings as psychotherapy, for example. So yeah, I think it's a great idea, and I'm very glad to be in this project.
And the future of psychological mental health support appears to be just the right blend of the two worlds, online, or if we call it hybrid, and in-person experience. Is that the case?
Yes, I think so. I think we don't have a specific choice here, especially during the pandemic time and after the pandemic time. I think such tools like mental health line and a remote access to psychologists, to psychotherapists will be the future. You can use it very fast. You can. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Please finish.
No, let's start. I think I'll tell you more about it further.
Wonderful. I have a whole series of questions for you. To start with, where's the most important vulnerability area? Where does the mental health crisis really start? What are the most sensitive areas where we should expect a crisis emerging?
Oh, that's a difficult question, because, mental crisis can affect any of us. It's a very democratic issue. Unlike severe mental disorders, it can happen at any time at work or in our family life. All you need is a more difficult situation, in fact. So the most vulnerable areas, of course, it's an area of our emotions, but mental crisis, it's something different. You can, for example, experience some difficult situations like death of someone close or losing a job. But on the other hand, you can experience a burnout, which is not so obviously strong situation. It rather increases with time, and it is also a kind of crisis, mental crisis.
So how do you distinguish between, say, mild disorder? I mean, without professional consultation, before you reach the stage where professional consultation is required. Because what you're saying, it sounds like a mental crisis is more of an emotional overload situation, a temporary situation, which can deteriorate or turn into a disorder.
Yes, some may ask that or quote that mental crisis is some kind of shorter mental disorder. Yes and no. On the one
mental
hand,
disorder. I think
yeah, I heard
a
such
psychiatrist would feel offended
expression.
at that.
Yeah. But on the one hand, I want to stress that mental crisis is not a regular mental disorder, for sure. We have to remember that more complex mental disorders are often a result of several causes, like our early experiences with important persons, for example, a process of socialization in our childhood, and as well our genetics to some extent. On the other hand, I want to say clearly, it's very important that without a relevant help, a mental crisis may increase in time, destroying our emotions or even disintegrating our personality in time. So yes, it may end up with long-term mental disorders, for example, depression.
So
That's why I want to stress here. Yeah.
Before it
I just
gets there,
wanted...
what are the symptoms that we should be after?
The simplest to recognize and the most alerting symptom is the change. The change that you observe in a daily functioning. Please observe yourself, whether you sleep not well, whether it's more difficult for you to start the day, for example, in the morning, whether you have less energy than usual, or it's more difficult for you to concentrate on the jobs. Observe also the emotional changes, such as more frequent anxiety, or irritation, or mood changes, or more severe symptoms, of course, like panic attacks or growing sadness. I want to stress that it's very important to reach for help immediately. And one more thing I want to state clearly, a crisis trigger doesn't have to be very strong. It doesn't have to be obvious. I said about something about burnout symptoms. First, you cope well with your professional duties, but with time, you start to feel more and more exhausted. You experience a lack of motivation, you feel more and more distant from your job. And at the end, you are working almost like a machine, or you are not able to get up and go to the work at all. But the crucial question for me...
Are we trying to solve problems with steering towards addictions, like becoming a workaholic?
Yes, sometimes, of course, sometimes. I think the first issue and the most important issue is that we are trying to cope with everything on our own. We are ashamed to ask for help. I think it's a most important issue to stress here. We should just consult our state right away when we feel bad. And I think that's a crucial question. Why don't we call a psychologist just like we call an emergency? It's like you have got an accident, for example. Now you have a wound, you're bleeding severely, but you won't go to a hospital. You just arrive at work with bleeding leg? I don't think so. It sounds like madness. It is a real madness.
But I'm afraid this analogy doesn't really work in full. I mean, it's very easy to look at things like that, but it doesn't incorporate all the key factors, like our sense of pride and sense of independence, the fact that we mostly feel, yeah, we can handle it over time, we will solve it, we're it will make us feel a little too immature if we cannot handle something like this. So there are various excuses that people tend to come up with. I mean, look at people who are addicted to various across this full spectrum of types of addictions. They all address it with the same series of excuses.
Yes, you're right. Of course, you're right. Addictions is another huge problem, but everything starts with a shame. I want to stress it very clearly. I hear often from our patients on the mental health helpline that they felt ashamed even before they call us psychologists. Not to mention about being ashamed.
Is it shame alone? I wonder, because I think this might just be a little too easy a categorization, because when you think about how frustration and being annoyed with one thing or another can migrate to, just like you put it, eventually maybe even shame. But is it always shame alone?
Of course not. There's also lack of knowledge because, no one teaches us how to care about the mental shape, about our mental health. They taught us how to brush our teeth regularly, for example, or to call a doctor when you feel not well physically, but not mentally. But we are used to judge ourselves. And it's a huge problem. Almost all the time, we judge ourselves at school, at work, even at home, in our family roles. We used to judge ourselves pretty severely. We don't want to be perceived as too weak, not productive enough, especially in business environment. Please ask yourself: would you call a psychologist right away if you have started to feel bad?
Mm-hmm. That's a fair question, of course. But tell me, in companies, people, especially, during coffee breaks and meeting after work, they talk about, finding just the right doctor for their child who is sick, and basically daily life situations. And when it comes to psychological health, it's still a bit of a taboo, isn't it? It's a sign of weakness.
Oh, you're so right. I worked in business over 15 years, also in international corporation. I know that mental health have been some kind of taboo until now, yes. But I also conduct studies in my lab at the university on well-being and mental shape of employees. And I must say that I can see that attitudes to mental health are changing in time, although they are changing very, very slowly. I think the issue is that we created in business an image of a perfect employee, someone who is almost like a machine, very fast, always perfect, always fresh, always ready for a new challenge. And just now, business leaders have started to see that it's not possible to be such an employee all the time without costs. Organizations sometimes forget that employees in 21st century work intellectually, and there is no chance to be intellectually efficient or creative when you are in a bad mental shape, period. So just like we talk about any other health problems, we should start to discuss and support ourselves also in this business environment according to some mental issues.
What you're saying, it sounds like we're trying to identify this problem at employee level. They shouldn't be ashamed. It shouldn't be a taboo. They should learn how to talk about it, how to be more genuine and open. But at the same time, you yourself mentioned a while ago that companies continue to foster a meritocratic, competence, achievement-based models with all sorts of metrics attached to that. More than that, role models, if you look at the biggest technological companies worldwide, if you read biography of one of the most famous visionaries and leaders in the technology world, you will hear about him continuously repeating that they're interested only in top-class employees, A players, the best of the best. So how much space is there really for sentiment? Because are we planning here now to start blaming employees for not being too open, too direct, but at the same time, are we talking about any organizational fertile ground for really having this kind of a conversation? Because are you trying to tell me that if an employee comes, okay, I've been having those psychological problems for a very long time, but because I'm strong and educated and disciplined, I've been fighting them also and doing the best I could, but it's reached a point where it really is a crisis now. So do you think on a purely intuitive level, this person will feel, yes, but my organization will save me, help me, support me, be patient while I'm doing with that? Are we talking about this kind of ecosystem already, or are we just starting on the road to that ecosystem?
Oh, definitely not. I think it's a long path to such a great point. But you know, we have to start with some point, and I just want to say here that we all remember, according to business leaders that you mentioned, that business leaders decided to implement procedures that prevented from physical accidents at work, at workplace, at factories. And it was years ago, and they decided to do this because the costs of accidents, physical accidents, were too high. So now I'm talking to you, to business leaders as well. Now it's time for mental health care and for a proper prevention, because costs of burnout and depression are growing very, very fast. So I think it's some turning point right now because of the pandemic. You know, pandemic just shed the light on some problems like mental health, and we have to start to discuss them, because mental health was a second or third or further problem until now. And now we can see that mental shape, mental health is really important when you want to be intellectually in a good shape, when you want to be intellectually effective.
I'm sure, Justyna, it might still be a little too early for quantifiable, reliable research or surveys showing us how big this trend is, people facing more mental health issues now. But can you think of a study that we could recommend for our leaders today itself?
There are many studies as well already. For example, even in my lab, we studied an influence of everyday kindness and creating a culture of being kind one another. Also at work, in business environment, the influence of everyday kindness on our well-being, on our individual shape, and on pro-social behaviors during the pandemic time. And there are research, yeah?
Yeah, please continue.
There are already research that showed that the level of anxiety experienced at work is increasing very, very much during this pandemic time. And you cannot work effectively intellectually when you feel bad, when you are in a fear all the time. So we have to do something with this topic. We have to start to do something with a mental shape.
I'm sure we couldn't agree more with you on that one. Justyna Bąba, thank you for finding the time, for joining us. Justyna Bąba, mhhelpline.com. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you.